bat, Chiroptera. Bats can be very important pollinators. Oregon has over 14, and 8 of those are conservation strategy species. Could these mammals be misinterpreted for monsters? Could it explain what eyewitnesses are seeing in the state of New Jersey? Or is it something more devilish?
This isn't normal. This wasn't human. And there was these lights, like 2 red lights like this.
I started out as a perfectly normal, healthy little baby boy with blonde hair and blue eyes, but then something went terribly wrong. Have you seen Mother Leeds' 13th child?
The RRN Ropen Radio Network is brought to you by 511 Tactical. Always be ready. By the Creation Museum. Prepare to believe. By the Enchanted Forest. Fun for all ages. Come visit a world of enchantment. And by the Wildlife Safari, America's top cheetah breeding program. You are closer to Africa than you think.
Hello, welcome to the Ropen Network. We are broadcasting from the heart of Oregon, and Salem is listening. If you are watching on CC Media, we appreciate you tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, thank you for commenting and subscribing to this network. This channel was created for you, the eyewitness. Let's talk Jersey Devil. I have dived into this Leeds Devil before, but for this go-around, I felt it'd be ideal to bring with it a familiar voice, possibly shed some light, lore, and perhaps clear up a few misunderstandings about this creature. Just in case you are not acquainted with the 13th child, to summarize, the creature is said to be some sort of chimera, a monster that is said to be inhabiting the Pine Barrens and other townships in Jersey. Now, some of the most recent accounts that have really caught the imagination of this field of work and for investigators everywhere is this. In 2015, David Black was driving from Little Egg Township when he saw something come running out of the woods that he said looked a lot like a llama. And then it flew off. Interesting. Now, this picture has been looked at over and over and over, and people have said it's a fake, but Dave remains true to his word that he says it's a real creature. Dave says it's a real creature. People have analyzed this photo over and over and over again. I've taken a look at it myself. I have to admit there's something not quite right. It almost looks like someone's just tossing some sort of animal in the air. But nonetheless, for those who ask, why didn't you have your smartphone? Voila. He had his smartphone with him. It's a great photograph. It's worth looking into. And David, or Dave, if you're listening, contact me. I'd love to hear from you. ropentracker@gmail.com. I promise you we'll make you feel right at home on this network. I'd love to hear more about your encounter. It's very amazing encounter. Also, another one that has made its rounds online is this one here. A very dark photo. Object seen in Pennsylvania flying over the freeway. Now, the gentleman said he took this picture, but he wasn't alone with him in the vehicle at the time. They both saw it. We refer to him as RW. That's the only initials he wants to go by. I guess I understand the ridicule that he could receive once people see it and decide to choose for themselves and decide to ridicule him. Well, this one's really, really good. And I got to say, there's definitely something there. It looks like almost like a cross between a bat and a goat, because we see the horns. There's two horns there. Very interesting photo. All these are recent, but I'm not going to go into this other ridiculous video. It almost looks like a My Little Pony floating in the air. No, I can clearly see that that is a fake. But after Dave Black's first encounter, others started to come forward. Nonetheless, these are great, great images of what presumed to be a Jersey Devil, or the Leeds Devil. Moving right along, my guest today is a Fulbright professor and teaches American Studies at Rutgers University. He is an author and the director of the New Jersey Folk Festival. He's been featured on shows such as Into the Unknown and History Channel's Monster Quest Season 3, Episode 4, titled Devils in New Jersey. This is Angus Gillespie on the Ropen Network.
Hello.
Hi, Angus. How's everything in your neck of the woods? Do you currently live in New Jersey?
Yes, I live in central New Jersey near New Brunswick, which is, we say, exit 9 on the turnpike. And the Pine Barrens, where I've done most of my research on the Jersey Devil, is south of here in the southeast part of New Jersey, the Pine Barrens, which is relatively sparsely populated.
I see. And now you've been teaching folklore at Rutgers University for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, since 1973. Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
That's a long time.
yeah, what happened was I had a background from graduate school in folklore, and my supervisors at Rutgers had me teaching courses in folklore, and I figured it would be useful to find New Jersey examples. And my students from South Jersey put me on to the story of the Jersey Devil, and that's I started to do the research. Yes.
See, so you actually had somebody kind of show you the way, and then it took off from there.
That's right. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, before we go into some of these things related to this creature, I kind of want to know, do you consider yourself more of a folklorist, or do you consider yourself more of a cryptozoologist these days?
Oh, I prefer to call myself a folklorist, though I find cryptozoology fascinating, to be sure.
Okay. This creature is quite interesting, and it kind of lines up with some of the things that we're doing on this network. As I mentioned, we do talk a lot about cryptozoology and some of the studies behind it. My personal background deals with the flying phenomena, which is what a lot of people have been seeing worldwide, not just in Papua New Guinea, but in the States as well. And that's usually involving pterodactyls, which is a totally different ballgame. But who knows? We could be on the same page with this one, but we'll get to that. I want to jump ahead here too soon.
Okay.
But
I figured in Oregon you'd be working on Bigfoot.
Well, there's so many Bigfoot researchers in Oregon, and I do mean a lot. So when I come up with the when we gather and we meet, I mentioned that I'm involved in pterodactyls or ropens, and they really stop in their place. They look at me like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, well, are you serious about Bigfoot? Of course I'm serious.
Yeah.
So this whole thing began with the Leeds family, and I'd like to know a little bit about them. I'm sure there's a good amount of people who know the lore, and I want to dive into it just a little bit, but I don't want to do too much because I'm sure it's really well known, but maybe for the audience here in Oregon, they may not be too familiar with it. This is our chance to understand it a little bit better, but I'd like to first look into this family that may have moved in to this particular area of the Pine Barrens in the early 1700s. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, folks in those parts said it was a strange family, an unusual family. Some people even said that Jane Leeds was a witch. Well, we do know it was a bit unusual for the day. It was such a large family. They had 12 children, and there were problems with the family. Daniel Leeds, the husband, he was a good hunter and a good fisherman and a respectable gardener. There was always food on the table. That wasn't the problem. The problem was with 12 children, Jane Leeds was very tired of all the childcare, picking things up, putting things away, preparing the food, doing the laundry, fetching the water. She was pretty much at her wit's end. She was pretty exhausted. And then, according to the story, when she learned that she was pregnant with her 13th child, in a moment of perhaps understandable weakness, as she was saying her bedtime prayers, she said, "Lord, let this one not be a child, let this one be a devil." Well, we now know that that was a mistake, because when Mother Leeds' 13th child was born, it started out as a perfectly normal, healthy little baby boy with blonde hair and blue eyes, but in the space of less than 20 minutes, this creature grew to the size of 2 full-grown men, and in place of the baby face, there was a horrible head of the horse, and it had the massive torso of a man, the feet of a goat, and bat-like wings, and a long serpentine tail. It had powerful biceps and arms, and at the end of each arm were furry paws, and at the end of each paw were long bony fingers with razor-sharp fingernails. And then, unpredictably, the creature reached out and slit the throat of the midwife, who collapsed in a pool of blood. And the creature gave out a blood-curdling scream and escaped into the Pine Barrens, where he's terrified the people of South Jersey for the last 250 years.
I see. Now, would you say this all took place in 1735? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
That's where it took place.
Okay.
You know.
Okay.
And to this day, people say that if you go into the woods at night and you hear the sudden crack of a twig behind you, beware. Beware of the Jersey Devil.
He says it so well, folks. I knew that he would know a thing or two about this case, as this creature has become quite an all-star in this field. I mean, you can mention like Sasquatch, you can mention the Loch Ness Monster, but easily, I'd say 7 out of 10 people say Jersey Devil next. And it seems to be something they want to explore and find out more about. The account of the Leeds family is quite fascinating, because you have 12 children, and these 12 children probably have birth records that we could probably look up. I know there's so many names, and these are Quaker, not the same as Amish, correct, Angus?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
They're different. Their philosophical ideas are different. And some would say, this has come to my attention, they're more superstitious, and that they tend to use amulets or some sort of necklace wear to warn off evil spirits. But yet, when you bring in something like this, it's kind of contradicting in a way. We weren't there, so we don't know really if this legend is true or not, but some say it is.
Yeah, you're quite correct. The essence of legend is this is a traditional story with a belief component. And the way our minds are wired, we tend to be either believing in it or skeptical. And for me as a folklorist, what I struggle to do is to try to keep an open mind, not to be too gullible or too skeptical. Try to just look at the facts. And one of the most fruitful avenues is to collect the stories. I remember working with the History Channel a few years back, and their approach was kind of quasi-scientific. They were attempting to prove whether it existed or didn't exist. And and I was quoted, but I was just one of half a dozen experts, and the folkloristic view did not prevail. But what I kept saying is, well, this creature may or may not exist. What does exist for sure are the stories, the legends, and that's where I like to focus my attention.
I see. Yeah, and you've done an excellent job of it too for that
Thank you.
amount of time. It's just when I look at this, there's a part of me too wants to look at this from a healthy skeptic point. Anytime I go into something, I have to be a little skeptic. You have to. It's very easy to be a full-fledged believer in something. But going back to this, some would say this began in 1735, 1778, 1830, 1850. But there's like different stories tangled into this, and not involving the Leeds, but some other parts of it too. Are you familiar with that?
It's almost inevitable if we look at the kind of the definition of folklore, definition of the legend. It's oral, it's traditional, it's anonymous, it's formulaic, it exists in different versions. Well, if it's oral, that means it's not written down. That means it's passed on by word of mouth. Well, inevitably, if it's passed on by word of mouth, it's going to exist in different versions. I'm inclined to go with the Leeds explanation of 1735, but I'm aware that in the retelling, it could shift over time.
Yeah, which it has a few times from what it seems, what I've gathered. And I think about his name is Japheth. We know that the Quakers aren't the same as Amish, and that they were there early 1700s, more likely. Lots of children. There's easily potentially good birth records for them, but there's no birth record whatsoever of the 13th child, is there? Have you gone looking for that?
No. Yes. In nearby Smithville, there's a church with a graveyard, and there are tombstones of the Leeds family going back a long, long way, but not all the way to the early 1700s. So my impression is that it's an established fact that the Leeds family has been in this area along the Mullica River for a long, long time. But when we push it all the way back to the 1700s, the records are sketchy.
I see. Okay. Well, that wouldn't surprise me. No, not at all. Tell me something, Angus. What is the difference between active and passive tradition bearers?
Oh, so glad you asked. I find this all the time in my classes at Rutgers. In general, I would say that the students from northern New Jersey and from central New Jersey, which represents about 80% of the Rutgers enrollment. Rutgers is the state university of New Jersey. Only about 20% of the students are actually from South Jersey. And there's a big difference. I think that most of the students in North Jersey, they've heard of the Jersey Devil. In passing, they have an awareness of it, but they don't know any of the details. They don't know the story. Whereas the students from South Jersey usually know chapter and verse about the story. So I would say the active tradition bearers, they know the story intimately. The passive, they just have a passing awareness of it. And I think in the case of New Jersey, there are several factors at work. One of the factors is that over time, this creature was originally called the Leeds Devil. And at some point, the term started to be calling the Jersey Devil. Well, right away, you have more name recognition. And then in 1939, perhaps as a playful gesture, the state legislature made the Jersey Devil the official state demon of New Jersey. So, most every state has a state flower or a state bird or a state tree. Last time I checked, New Jersey is the only state with an official state demon.
Yes.
So that helps promote the widespread passive awareness. And then other factor, there's some point along in the 1980s that New Jersey got a professional hockey team, and they had a contest, and they tried to figure out what to call their team, and they finally came up with the idea where they called the team the New Jersey Devils, which increased awareness. But as a folklorist, I find a lot of problems with it. First of all, it's the Jersey Devil, not the New Jersey Devil. And it's the Jersey Devil singular, not New Jersey Devils plural. But of course, this is a hockey team. It has to be plural. I get it. But what's really happened in the 21st century, I think, is this traditional local legend has morphed into the world of popular culture.
Yeah. Which I don't think you're much of a fan of when it comes to this.
No. In fact, I get a lot of queries every October as we get towards Halloween. And I get questions from newspapers and television stations, radio stations. And as I'm reading the newspaper accounts, they tend to go one of two ways. One is that they'll treat it humorously. They're looking for entertainment possibilities. And the other approach is scientifically to dismiss it. Well, we can't prove it, therefore it doesn't exist. And those tend to be the two ways that it's treated in popular culture.
Yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate. It seems like a lot of things have to circle around the month of October. If someone's looking for a cheap thrill or cheap scare or whatever the other, it's not the direction I would prefer people to take when it comes to these things, because I like to take these things very seriously, especially if there's eyewitness accounts, which we will get into shortly. But before we do, let's talk about the Great Scare of 1909, when this really started to take shape. It's funny because if this began in 1735, then it took a long time for this thing to resurface, as if it was colonizing or migrational pattern of some sort. Just keeps coming back to the Pine Barrens. 1909.
Yeah, 1909, in the month of January, this was wintertime, and there was snow on the ground. And we're really talking about the area of Burlington County, which is just east of Philadelphia across the Delaware River. And today, in Burlington County, it's largely suburban Philadelphia. But back in 1909, this was a farming country in the Pine Barrens. And what happened, it was 1909, it was January, and there was a massive sighting of strange, large tracks in the snow. And immediately, people's mind leapt to the conclusion, well, this must be the Jersey Devil. And this was circulating among the Pineys in Burlington County. And of course, word reached across the river to the west of Philadelphia. And the Philadelphia newspapers picked up on this because it's a very interesting story. And this is before the era of newspaper photography. We're still talking 1909. And there was a lot of competition. There was maybe half a dozen active daily newspapers in Philadelphia at the time. And each of them would send a team across the river to New Jersey to investigate. And typically your team would consist of two people. There would be a reporter and an illustrator, an artist. And the procedure was to interview the local Pineys and get the story, and at the same time, based on the informant's description, the artist would do a sketch. And then these were in turn published in the Philadelphia newspapers with wide circulation. But there was a problem. These city slicker newspapers were skeptical, and they were patronizing, and they didn't really take the Piney sightings seriously. And this was reflected in the drawings, which our listeners can see for themselves in the published books. Yeah. But these drawings were basically comical. They might show a drawing of the Jersey Devil reading a newspaper account about himself, as if the Jersey Devil was a publicity seeker. Or it might show the Jersey Devil with a top hat smoking a cigar. It might show the Jersey Devil holding a balloon while just having laid an egg. Well, this is entertaining, it's comical, it's amusing, but the Pineys aren't stupid. They read newspapers too, yep. And they became very, very angry. They realized that they were being made fun of. They realized they were being patronized. They realized they were not being taken seriously. And so these Pineys kind of made a resolution: never again will I talk to strangers about my deep beliefs. And so that was 1909. I come along some 60 years later, and nobody really wants to talk to me. But gradually, fortunately, having some folklore training, I came up with what I would call the correct approach. When I was talking to Pineys in South Jersey, I was very, very careful. I would try to establish rapport first. And so on my initial meeting, we might talk about familiar, neutral topics: the hunting, the fishing, the gardening, the weather, the child rearing. We would bond. And then maybe in subsequent visits, I would tell them, well, at Rutgers, I deal with old songs and stories and traditions. And we would gradually, and if we reached a point of rapport, I might eventually touch upon the Jersey Devil. But that's the last thing I would do, not the first thing I would do.
I agree.
And, yeah.
Good approach.
Yeah. Showing respect for the traditions. And then the way it tends to work is you don't get like a coherent fairy tale, a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. You tend to get fragmentary accounts. For example, one of the Pineys I knew a lot of Pineys because at the same time I was running the New Jersey Folk Festival in New Brunswick, and I was looking for traditional musicians. And so oftentimes we had a bond over the music. A typical example might be Merce Ridgway. He was a guitar player and a clam fisherman, and grew up in the area. And most of the time we were either talking about his music or his clam fishing. Eventually a talk on the Jersey Devil, and he gave me an interesting little piece, which was when he was about 8 years old. He had been put to bed, and his parents were still up in the living room, and he was having trouble getting to sleep, and he sort of comes down the staircase, and he quietly overhears his parents' conversation, and the parents are talking about one of their sightings years earlier of the Jersey Devil. That's not a coherent story. That's not beginning, middle, and but it's a sincere sighting, sure, reported within the family. Another example, I was talking to a Piney by the name of Joe King, and he told a story about how a friend of his had sighted the Jersey Devil and became so frightened that he came home and he was incoherent.
Okay.
Well, that's a fragmentary account, but it's a sincere account, admittedly from a friend of a friend. Another account I heard from Gladys Eyre, who was a musician from Waretown, New Jersey. And she told a story at some length. It was fascinating that in the early days, the Pineys along the Atlantic coast, they knew that there were pirates out there. And they knew that the pirates had treasure. So one of the things that they did back in those days was maybe they would gather a huge pile of straw along the beach, set it on fire as if it were a lighthouse. And then the pirates would mistake it for the Barnegat Light and think that the water was deep, and the ship would come too close to shore and would wreck. Pineys would kill the pirates, take the treasure, and then bury it in the woods. But they would promote the story, better not go into the woods or the Jersey Devil will get you. It's a way of protecting the treasure.
Yeah.
Well, that's a coherent story.
Sure is.
Kind of makes sense.
It does. And then I think about something else too. Makes me wonder what else they know about the exact location of this home where the Leeds may have lived. Is this referred to as the Shroud House? And what would be the correct place? Because I see when I go looking for the location, I don't think it's there anymore. I think it's just the ruins, isn't it?
That's right. From time to time, there are different houses that have been named as the birthplace of the Jersey Devil. And you're correct that the Shords house was one such house, but it's long since collapsed. And there were others, but for example, I was at Leeds Point and I stopped off at the Leeds Point Inn, and I went to the bar and sat down and had a drink and talking to the bartender, and the bartender made me a map sketch and said, well, if you go here, this is the exact birthplace of the Jersey Devil, which was about 6 miles up the road. Well, it was a charming, interesting stone house, but from my knowledge of architecture, it was from the mid-19th century. There's no way that this... I mean, a story, and it's in the woods, and it's a beautiful house, but it's the wrong architecture for the 1700s. Yeah. So looking for the birthplace, it's pretty...
I bet. I think I've seen a few people find it. But when they did, it's just remnants of what it once was. I was going to ask you if you happen to know the exact location, the coordinates actually, of something like that. Is it easy to look up? Or is it on private property? You can't get to it anymore? No. Well, right.
They've had enough annoyance, yeah.
Okay. So you would say that so that means that the Shroud House is the one he pointed to or he showed you?
No, this is a different one. The Shrouds is collapsed, yeah.
Okay. That could be in the right location. It's collapsed and it's so tough to tell. It really is. Okay. We know what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break here, Angus. Then we're going to touch on some more things that would involve some of the tribes. I may know a thing or two about this. Before we do, we're going to take a quick break and give a shout out to some local businesses. You are listening to Cryptozoological Talk on the RRN Ropen Radio Network. We'll be right back with Angus Gillespie, the Jersey Devil.
It isn't just a tagline.
It's a perpetual call to action for the mission of a lifetime. For purpose-driven people who always demand more of themselves for the greater good. This isn't existential BS. It's an exponential MO. The more self-reliant we are, the more we can be relied upon. The more strength we build, the more we can protect those who can. The more our selfless commitment, the more our integrity grows. The more we answer the call of service, the more we respect others who serve. The more we're ready, the more we can live a life bigger than ourselves. For mind and body, from head to toe, we are the purpose-driven brand who make purpose-built gear for those on the mission of a lifetime. This is why we will always be ready. Will you?
You're listening to Cryptozoological Talk on the RRN Ropen Radio Network. We're back with Angus Gillespie, and lots of years under his belt in the folklorist category. You name it. He teaches this to his class as well, and he does spiels on this at the University of Rutgers University. As a matter of fact, we're talking about the Jersey Devil, but the information he's given me is something I've been really, really fascinated with for a long time. And it's nice to have someone who's studied this, who's looked into it, even has his people in his class are actually going and they're finding out this information too. That's what we want. We want to see people investigating more. I want to see people get out there. The real adventure is out there. But of course, if you're going to do that, be safe. Don't go alone. I think he would agree on that one. All right. So we're back here and I'm thinking more about this because when I talk to the tribes, such as in Washington State, when we're dealing with Ropens, they always have a good understanding of the wildlife that's in their neck of the woods. So what do the tribes say about this creature? The one that comes to mind, Angus, was the Lenape tribe, or you could say Lenape Lenape is one of them. But I've been told that they've named this area Popuessing, unless I've said that wrong. Popuessing, I'm not sure. Maybe Angus knows the correct way to say that. Are you familiar with this word?
No, I have to say I'm not. I will say I have done, because of my work with the Folk Festival, I've done work with a number of New Jersey tribes. But the Lenni Lenape, who were in the Pine Barrens, have largely left because there was disputes in the 1700s where the Anglo settlers would draw up purchases of the land, but the Lenni Lenape didn't really understand what a purchase meant. They thought that they were sharing the land with the settlers, but the settlers thought that they were buying the land outright. And because of this conflict, oftentimes, even after the land was sold, the Lenni Lenape would return to their original hunting grounds or their original fishing grounds. And this would lead to conflicts, sometimes armed conflicts. And eventually, from my understanding, the Indians were simply driven out of the Pine Barrens. So I don't really have a Lenny Lenape viewpoint on the Jersey Devil. I I also suspect that the Jersey Devil, in this case, was not a Native American belief that pre-existed, because I have come across legends in the British Isles from the 1640s that describe a monster with the head of a horse, the wings of a bat, the feet of a goat, and a long serpentine tail. So it occurs to me that when the Pineys saw something strange in the woods, this pre-existing monster description came to mind. So I think out west there are traditions which pre-existed the Europeans, where the Native Americans described monsters that were similar. You're in Oregon. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but my reading of Bigfoot is that this was a pre-existing belief among Native Americans before Europeans came along.
That would be correct.
Yeah, and I just don't think that fits for the Jersey Devil, as best I can tell.
Mm.
One of the things I have fun with my students at Rutgers is, legends have to do with belief. Mm. And so can we prove that the Jersey Devil exists? Well, how would you go about that? And you got to get out there and look. Yeah. And so far we have been unable to prove that it exists. And then I enjoy turning it around, and I'll say to them, okay, how would you go about proving that it does not exist?
That's the key, right there.
And then that takes us back to Philosophy 101. You really cannot prove that it does not exist.
Logically.
There's no way to do that. So,
yeah. And with these names are actually quite interesting, because you have one that's from the Swedish settlers. They called it Drake Kill. And you assume, well, you should never assume, but bear in mind that we're talking about some sort of dragon, some sort of creature. I mean, why would you name a place? If this is true that these names actually came from somewhere, I can't imagine people just randomly coming up with this stuff for what reason. If you're going to name it something after some sort of creature, there's got to be a reason for it. But actually, I'm going to touch on this a little bit later, because I think it's really important for some of these things. Some of your students, tell me a little bit more about their personal experiences when they how many students have gone looking for this thing that you know of?
Yeah. Back in the 1970s, when I first came to Rutgers, in my folklore classes, I would often give an assignment, or for extra credit, they could do field work and go to the Pine Barrens and try to find these stories. And we even set up a little folklore archive at Rutgers University. And my experience was that most of the students who attempted to do this did not succeed. They were unable to get the story. But I was very careful in grading the papers. Just because you didn't get the story doesn't mean you fail the assignment. What I'm interested in, how did you go about it? How did you try? And as long as it was a sincere effort, success or failure wasn't really the point. At least you tried. And they were hitting the same problems that I hit. It's very difficult to establish rapport, and it takes time. Eventually, I gave up on those assignments because there's too many people were striking out.
But I think from their point of view, maybe they also looked at it as if it was an adventure for them,
Yeah.
And they got them involved in something they may not have been interested in before.
Yeah.
Now, it's a different story for them.
Yeah, and it's also true, I think, when you go to college today, a lot of the rationale for paying these high prices for tuition is that you hope that a college education will lead to a good paying job. I understand that. But I think it's nice to be able to take a few electives along the way in the humanities, just part of a general education, not necessarily leading to a job. Philosophy, literature, history, folklore, the arts. This makes for a better person and a fuller life. Doesn't lead to a job.
Yeah, and I think the more you know, the better, the more equipped you are for the world around you.
Yeah.
So important. Yeah. Now, there's something here that I would like to discuss, if you know a little bit about it. Mercy Ridgway of Waretown, Ocean County. You know something about that?
Yeah, Merce Ridgway, he was he made his living in Barnegat Bay mostly by clam fishing. His hobby was guitar playing and songwriting, and I love using him as an example in my classes because back around 1909, there was a social worker by the name of Elizabeth Kite who had done social work in the Pines, and she was an upper middle class social worker, and she was kind of shocked and horrified at the piney lifestyle, which didn't necessarily involve taking a shower daily, and she reached the conclusion that people that were that dirty, well, they must be mentally retarded, and that idea caught on and even was echoed by the governor of the state at the time. And so the word piney, starting in 1909, became almost a derogatory term. And even today, I tell my students, the people in the Pine Barrens, they call each other piney, and that's okay. It's affectionate. But it's not a good idea for you or me to go down south and for us to call them piney. And so Merce Ridgway is an excellent example. He's not an imbecile. He's not mentally deficient. He wrote his own autobiography. And I was flattered. He asked me to write the foreword to it. So he's a splendid example. There's nothing mentally deficient about the Pineys. What's different about the Pineys is they tend not to want to work in a factory between 8 and 4. They don't want to work in an office between 9 and 5. They prefer to be self-sufficient. They don't like having an employer or a boss. So the ideal piney lifestyle is independent. You try to make a living through hunting and fishing and gardening, and you're self-sufficient. Now that's the ideal, but of course, just like the rest of us, the Pineys do need some money, and they're willing to take cash employment on a short-term basis, maybe working for the county road system, or maybe picking the cranberries in season.
Yeah.
Because they'll need money to go to the general store for a well cleaner or shotgun shells or work boots. But the ideal lifestyle is self-sufficiency.
Sounds like I got a lot of me and me. Let's go back here for a moment, Angus. Let's go back to the 1909 scare. It comes to my attention there are different variants of this creature. If you choose to believe the stories of these eyewitnesses back then, it's all took place January 16th to January 23rd, my birthday. A large amount of days there, but I've had accounts of different phenomena that it lasted 11 days in small amounts, just coming back. So one of these particular stories involves something, a creature that spewed some sort of a toxin from its mouth. But they said it also had the wings. It also could look like an alligator of some sort. But the first thing I think is pterosaur. That's just me, though. not be anybody else. But we're trying to find something to narrow this down, because all these different descriptions of this creature are so variant. They're so, because you describe the head of a horse or the head of a goat, but the wings, the tail. Yeah. And which would lead me to think why some people believe that there's a hammerhead bat in the Pine Barrens. This is not far-fetched to think. However, they're not native to the Pine Barrens. They're native to Africa, places like this. So people know a bat when they see a bat, especially a large one. But when you see this, it's not the same. It's more terrifying, such as the accounts of, I forgot her name, but she was featured on Monster Quest, and she passed away. She was also featured on the Boogeyman series as well. I could ask you about these eyewitnesses, but I want to hold that till later. When you look at these stories, how many stories have you read involving the 1909 scare?
Well, to be honest, I think the one I rely on most strongly is the McCloy and Miller account. Okay. That's pretty thorough. I have a theory about the 1909 accounts. I haven't seen this in print, and I haven't written it up. But what kicked off the 1909 scare? Remember, it's January. There's these footprints in the snow. Well, I think trackers tell us that what tends to happen with tracks in the snow, as the snow melts, the tracks get bigger and distorted. And so this may help account for the scare of 1909, distortion of tracks in the snow.
I see. Also, I looked at that picture, that famous black and white one. There's got to be more to it. However, something that stands out to me is not just what you mentioned, but the stride. Now, I only see a row of tracks here and a nice, almost nice line here. And I'm thinking, okay, if this thing's bigger than that, it's got to be a little bit more spread out, don't you think? The stride's got to be bigger. And the depiction of this thing is anywhere from 6 feet tall, maybe a little less than that. Am I correct on that?
Oh, you're right. I've tried to explain it away by the snow melting, but if you look at the distance between the tracks, if there's a long distance between one track and another, that would suggest a large animal.
I see.
Yeah.
Great. Have you had a chance to speak with other people such as Paul Pedersen Jr., who is very famous local out there? I know that people have come to him and given their account of this creature. He's one that I had a chance to speak with him. I'm hoping to have him on the network here later in the year, but very known individual, a talented musician. He's got a great voice. He's actually sang some great songs about the Pine Barrens. But have you had a chance to speak with someone, with Paul Pedersen Jr.?
No, I haven't. However, I could tell you this. There is a town along Route 9 in the heart of the Pine Barrens called Waretown, and they have a place, it's called Albert Hall, and every Saturday night, starting around 7 p.m., they have a concert of old-timey music, and that's a great gathering places for these traditional musicians of the Pine Barrens.
That's where more people will come if they've had a sighting.
Yeah. When you have the refreshment break, that's one of the topics that's likely to come up. Yeah, it's a gathering place. Yeah.
Okay. Another gentleman that comes to mind, too, is Chris Chaos, who actually says he found tracks of this thing. I think the tracks are about 4 inches wide, maybe about 9 inches in length, something like that. How about him? Have you had a chance to chat with him? Okay. And I'm sure there's so many people have come through. And to me, it's hard to take some of these people seriously. But I only know of a handful that I can trust with knowing the lore of this, such as yourself. One would be Paul. And I do remember there used to be a group called Devil Hunters that had a website back in the day. Since then, I don't know what happened to them.
Yeah, the Devil Hunters, they were a volunteer group that was pretty serious, and they would record the sightings and keep a log of who saw what when, and record it, and then it just sort of faded away. I think that's the problem with the volunteer effort.
I see.
People lost interest, and it kind of died. It was a worthwhile project while it lasted.
Yeah. That's too bad. We need more people out there researching this thing.
Yeah.
I know it seems like a scary creature to come across if you ever were, but I just don't know many who have. I know many cryptozoologists who have gone out there, but I'm looking for someone who's making this their number one focus and is spending so much time out there in this area. The Pine Barrens, most people say, well, you can't hide anything in the Pine Barrens. But there's a difference here. I think this creature is migrating. If there's something out there, I think it's coming from different areas. But what time of the year is the best time to spot this thing if you do see it? I think this thing's been seen throughout the year, hasn't it? Or has it been seen during only summer months?
No, I think it's been sighted throughout the year. You mentioned before Monster Quest. That it's interesting the way that's set up. It starts with a sighting, and then investigates the sighting, and they have some New York Police Department retired detectives doing the investigation. I guess you've seen that show, and then they have various hypotheses. They consult with a bat expert. They consult with an owl expert, and pretty much by the end of the 50-minute show, it seems that they conclude that Carrie Witherspoon, that what she saw was probably a misidentification of a great horned owl. The owl expert tells us that people who are not familiar with the woods and they see this creature with a big wingspan and the glowing eyes, they get freaked out, and it's a misidentification. That seems to be what you take away from the. It was also interesting that they conducted a lie detector test, and that proved that what she saw, she sincerely believed that she saw it. That doesn't mean that she saw the Jersey Devil, but she believes that she saw the Jersey Devil. So she was telling the truth in her own mind. And her son was the same way.
Yeah, that's right. I believe there was a gentleman who made a sculpture of this thing.
That's right, Mike Melillo. In fact, at the end of the show, we had a cast party at Mike Melillo's house, and we got to see the sculpture.
How big is that sculpture, by the way?
It was pretty massive, about the size of a full-grown man. In fact, I made friends with Mike Melillo, and we were able to bring his sculpture to the Folk Festival the following year.
Wow. Very nice. You know, when I look at that sculpture, he captured something really, really disturbing, but really well. The wings as it's kind of come in and the face peers through.
Yeah.
Now, going back to my thought on this creature is that this is where it gives me a chance to maybe speak with her and see if maybe she would think that this thing may be a living pterodactyl. Because from that distance at night, I mean, it's quite sinister looking, but pterosaurs, from what I know, can look very humanoid if you believe in the living pterosaur phenomenon. But the tracks on the roof change things a bit because they don't look like pterosaur tracks. But then again, with it being snow melts. Things change. Things form differently.
That's very interesting. That's the first time I heard the pterodactyl hypothesis, but it ties in with what she said she saw.
Yeah, it does. The sculpture looks a lot different from a pterosaur, but again, at night, uh, it can be a different thing completely. I mean, because I still think you can make out things in the nighttime, especially if there's a little bit of light. If it's completely pitch dark, then it's a lot difficult to define what that is in front of you. That's why I'd love to get her on the show if I can. Maybe she'll be willing. We'll see.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Angus, the military has kind of adopted something like this too, haven't they?
Yes.
The National Guard embraced the Jersey Devil. Is that the
Yeah.
case?
There's an New Jersey Air National Guard base not too far from Atlantic City, and when I was doing my work down there in the 70s, they had these F-4 jets with pictures of the Jersey Devil painted on the tail.
I see.
Another popular culture manifestation. Yeah.
Part of pop culture, yeah. But you've said very clear you're not too fond of the pop culture thing of what's going.
Yeah. Another example of, I think, of the pop culture thing is at the House of Representatives for the state of New Jersey in Trenton, New Jersey. At the podium, there's a carving of the face of the Jersey Devil on the podium. So that's kind of quasi-official endorsement.
Yeah, so. Well, that kind of leads me to something else too. I want to say this is probably Oklahoma, where this is taken in a far deeper route, but they have the statue of the Baphomet on their Capitol steps. You know what the Baphomet is?
No.
Now, this is a demonic deity that's pretty disgusting, as it has children off to the side looking up at it. And I've got to tell you, it looks a lot like the Jersey Devil, because it's got the goat face, it's got the horns, it's got the wings, it's got the tail. It's got the body of a man.
What's it called?
It's called the Baphomet.
I'll have to look that up. That's very interesting.
And I find there's some similarities here. Whenever we talk about some pretty sinister stuff in our world, that when people bring up Jersey Devil, they bring up Goat Man, Lizard Man. I think you may be acquainted with some of these things.
Yeah.
But it always seems to be part man. There's something that's almost a human form. And when I talked about this a couple of shows back, it's interesting how the enemy likes to twist God's creation to their benefit. I don't know if this is for fact something that's happening or whatnot, but it seems to be, if these beings that are potentially here, but if they're from supposedly the cosmos, that others would say, like ufologists, then why are they looking like us? Why do they take on appearances of humans?
Yeah, two examples come to mind. The Goat Man associated with Maryland and the Mothman associated with West Virginia. Yeah. So you're onto something there.
Yeah, I think it's one of those deep conversations I may have to have for another time. But I will say, to wrap this up, I'd like to get your personal take. What you truly think this thing is, and if you really think this thing exists out there. And I have to believe that with all the research you've done, that you haven't done just for fun, because there's some part of you that feels there's something out there. Am I wrong? Tell me a little about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I get this all the time from my students. Do you believe it or do you not believe it? And what I say is, I struggle. Because the way our minds are wired, it's very tempting to go to one side or the other. And what I've tried to do as a professional folklorist is to keep an open mind, to listen respectfully to the stories and not be dismissive of the stories, to keep alive the possibility that this thing might exist. Has it been proven? No. But let's keep the idea alive. Maybe someday it can be proven. that's a difficult position, but that's my position. I also want to just mention before we wrap things up, I was at a folklore conference in Oregon some time ago, and and I don't know if it's still the same case, but the governor was promoting bumper stickers that said something to the effect of, "Enjoy your visit here to Oregon, but please don't move here."
Now, what year was that?
That was back in the 80s. It was let's preserve Oregon as a sparsely populated place. Is that still going on?
No, I don't think so. Not with this current governor right now.
Okay.
I would know this because I work in politics as well. I serve with the chief clerk's office, and I've been doing that for 11 sessions.
I thought that was kind of,
yeah, ever since 1999, I think, to the very latest.
Yeah,
but it's funny how I got started in that. I won't go with that. But no, I think that's definitely changed over the years. Yeah, I think they're more like, yeah, come to Oregon. We're blanketed in darkness here during the winter time. It's a depressing state in the winter, but summertime, it's beautiful. It really is. We recommend people come here during the summer. If you want to come, feel free to. I don't know if you want to really stay here. You have taken a lot of vitamin D. But it's great for Sasquatching if you want to come out here and do some squatching. A lot of people do. We have a lot of researchers in this area. Yeah, but that's not my forte. I'll stick with the flying creatures.
Okay.
Yeah. Angus, what a pleasure to have you on this network. I really appreciate you being here. All your insights and what you're doing with your students at Rutgers University. It's amazing. I'm glad to hear from you. I'm glad all of the work that you've done involving folklore. There's so much there. All those years of doing it. Looks like you're not interested.
Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure.
Greatly appreciate it. Anytime you want to reach out, that's what I'm here for. And it just really just end with the show. You'll find me on LinkedIn. Anytime you want to chat, if I come across something, I'll share it with you. I find it fascinating.
Thank you. I'll do the same.
Yes, you have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Let's see, where are my notes? I might have to sit in on one of Angus's class someday. I wish you all the best, good sir. So, no doubt, in my mind, there are variants of devils migrating or living underground. That is, of course, if the Pine Barrens have cave systems. This monster seems to be a mishmash of creatures. The word chimera always comes to mind. Yes, the Leeds family has had a rich history in New Jersey. The name Leeds has achieved celebrity status amongst the townships. Now, this we know. Daniel Leeds was involved with astrology, which is the worship of the stars, not astronomy. Most of his fellow Quakers did not take too kindly to his ideals and, in some ways, alienated the Leeds family. Most people today would view Daniel as a person who thought outside the box, but his moral foundation, in some ways, was conflicting with Quaker beliefs. Daniel did produce the first almanac in the country in 1687, continuing until 1716, when his sons Felix and Titan succeeded him, and with whom Titan, fellow almanac maker Benjamin Franklin himself, engaged in ongoing feuds. I found it very interesting that the Leeds family crest has a wyvern on it. If you don't know what a wyvern is, it is basically a dragon. Before the word dinosaur came into being, the world referred to them as dragons. That's what a wyvern is. Now, I am not alluding to the idea that the Leeds family was somehow, some way mixed up in some sort of secret cult practices. My family crest has a dragon on it as well, but that does not imply they were seen by my great ancestors. Okay? People mention that Deborah was a witch, but I'm not so certain there's any proof to back this claim. Though, here is something to ponder on. Perhaps being alienated brought on a sense of rebellion. Thus, a wee bit of dabbling into the dark arts, such as witchcraft, was a result of the turmoil. Here's an article that was published in March of 2011 by a journalist from Burlington Times. Now, this article may very well be the key to this particular species, and I will try to summarize this the best I can. William B. Gallagher had just completed an entertaining presentation describing the dinosaurs that ruled New Jersey 60 million to 80 million years ago. He packed the room at the Pinelands Preservation Alliance in Southampton, Burlington County. My son Jamie, 9 at the time, and I arrived late. It was raining hard, and there was a detour. Gallagher described the Garden State's landscape in that prehistoric time as mountainous, with ranges rivaling the Alps. The climate was hot and dry, although there were lakes. It is from these ancient lake beds that most of the Jersey dinosaur bones are found. Aha, interesting. His slideshow displayed exotic and nightmarish creatures, Mesozoics, with long rows of razor-sharp teeth, and ferocious phytosaurs, which predated crocodiles. But when he showed a slide of an ornithomimus, the bird-mimic dinosaur that roamed Burlington County, I noticed its striking resemblance to an 8-foot mock-up of the Jersey Devil in the corner of the room. It was tall, 2-legged, with small arms and razor claws, and a mouth suited to rip flesh from bone. I waited until most of the crowd had departed and asked him. His response: "Ah, the Jersey Devil," Gallagher said, with an airy, jovial manner. "You mean the 13th son of Mrs. Leeds?" "Yes, I'm familiar with that story." He was not familiar with the whole story, though, notably the widely reported occurrences of January 1909, when a spectral 2-legged shrieking bird-like creature terrified people from Cape May to Bucks County. Stories of flying death, as newspapers called it, were carried on front pages coast to coast. The sightings stopped suddenly as they had begun. Gallagher appeared intrigued. "You mean," he said, "the Jersey Devil could be like the Loch Ness Monster, something like that continues to survive somehow?" "There's a million of acres of pines, plenty of places to hide," I said. "Well, that could be," he said. "I never saw any evidence of it. I spent a lot of time down in the pines when I was in graduate school. I had a field ecology course there. We spent weekends camping. Never saw or heard anything suspicious." "Not even a shriek?" I said. "Oh, the shriek sound? No, nothing." He did not close the door completely on it. However, wise men of science never claim a debate is over pending fresh evidence. Fascinating, wouldn't you say? This creature could very well be a living dinosaur, folks. Some scientists think that the Jersey Devil is actually a family of pterodactyls that have survived since prehistoric times, living in an underground cave system. Now, this was an article that was publicized by the Smithsonian, of all places, back in the day. And I think that this is a strong possibility, albeit the eyewitnesses claim it is nothing of the sort, but something far more monstrous. I have to admit I feel a little perplexed on the subject, but just like Gallagher or Angus or even Paul Pedersen Jr. and others who have come before me, I want to believe this creature is real. So what do I think? I do not believe that Deborah Leeds gave birth to a child who became a monster. Now, as a Christian, I believe without a doubt that rituals are conducted in the dead of night, in remote, secret locations. This is a fact. And some of these rituals involve children and animals. Bestiality is real in our world, and Scripture warns against these practices. It is an abomination. If these creatures are real, and not something of only myth, then my take on it as a cryptozoologist would clearly have a mistaken identity for a living pterosaur/Ropens, migrating through the Jersey Pine Barrens. Remember, Ropens are nocturnal and subterranean. And that is what throws everything off. So, from here on out, it's time to hear from you, the eyewitness. Have you seen the 13th child? Have you seen the Leeds Devil? If so, contact me at ropentracker@gmail.com. I'm ready to believe you. That's where we go from here. Not going to close a book on this one just yet. Folks, I hope you enjoyed the show today. It was great having Angus with us. And I look forward to our next conversation in the future. In the meantime, seek the truth, and may God bless every one of you on the other side of this screen. I'm your host, Jacob Guerra. We'll see you next time on the Ropen Radio Network.